Philosophical Instructions. An Introduction to Contemporary Islamic Philosophy by Ayatollah Misbah Yazdi. Instructor Dr. Muhammad Ali Shomali.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah al-aliy al-azim. Alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. Sallallahu ala sayyidina wa nabiyyina Abil Qasim al-Mustafa Muhammad wa ala alihi tayyibin at-tahirin. La siyama baqiyatullah fil aradin. In the name of Allah, the Compassionate, the Merciful. This is session 26 on lesson 21 of the book Philosophical Instructions by Ayatollah Misbah Yazdi. By starting this lesson, we are indeed starting a new section in the book, and that's on ontology. Of course, you remember that we have had two different sections up to now. The first was a short review of the history of philosophy and also about the significance of philosophy, definition of philosophy, its relation to sciences, including natural sciences and the theoretical sciences. And for example, we said that do we really need philosophy or not? And is philosophy important for us as human beings to be really human or not? So these sort of discussions were covered in the first section of the book. And then in the second section, we had a discussion about epistemology, of course, very short and brief. And that was about the role of sensation and human intellect in knowing the world around us. And we said that we are capable of knowing the reality. And then we had a discussion about the ability of knowing and understanding in respect to notions or in respect to tasawwurat and also in respect to propositions or tasdiqat. And you remember that we said tasawwurat or notions or ideas, people use different terms for that, are those concepts which are brought into our mind or we think about them without having any affirmation, without saying anything as a judgment between the subject and predicate. But in tasdiqat or affirmations or propositions, we have subject and predicate and affirmation of a relation between these two or negation of the relation between these two, like saying A is B or A is not B. So we discussed about these matters in section 2. And now here in section 3, having said the significance of philosophy and having argued for the possibility of knowledge, now we want to start actually exercising philosophical reflection on existence or on being. This is why this section is called ontology, which means knowing existence or being. The author says that it's very important to remember always that concepts are key players in philosophy, because we cannot make any philosophical inquiry, any philosophical study without using concepts. So we need concepts. Even when we are, for example, knowing something in a very direct and immediate way, and that is through our knowledge by presence of our own reality or our own feelings or faculties or acts, of course those acts which can be known in this way, when we want to reflect on them and we want to put them into propositional form, we need to use concepts. So my feeling of, for example, fear or joy or happiness, this does not need any concept. This is knowledge by presence. This is immediate. This is direct. But as soon as I want to reflect on that, I have to form a proposition. For example, I say I feel sad or I feel happy. So this becomes again a sort of conceptual knowledge or acquired knowledge, that is al-ilm al-husuli, which definitely needs concepts. So we are very much dependent on our mental concepts. And if we are not careful, if we are not cautious about the way that we use these concepts, then sooner or later we will make mistakes and we will get confused. And unfortunately, the history of history and many other also disciplines is a witness of commitment of many mistakes, or for example confusions by people who were on many occasions sincerely looking for the truth, but because they couldn't deal with the concepts properly, logically, so they were confused. They made mistakes. So this is very important that we try to always be alert about the way that we use the concepts, about the different forms of the concepts that we have, about different characteristics of the concepts, so that we have a full control of the concepts, which are our resources in philosophical discussion. So this is a very important point that we should be always bearing in mind. For example, if you remember, we had this discussion in the past that we have primary concepts which relate to the quiddity or to the whatness or to mahiyya. And we said that these concepts refer to the limits of the existence of the case which is at issue, the case that we are studying. For example, like saying, this is a man, this is a horse, this is a flower, for example, rose flower, this is water, this is paper, this is cotton, and so on. These concepts are called primary concepts, or these are called the concepts which refer to quiddity or whatness or nature or mahiyya, because they try to identify the nature of a group of beings which share the same nature. But these concepts are totally different from secondary concepts, whether it be philosophical or logical. For example, you remember that we said, for example, the concept of causation or causality. Causation or causality is totally different from the concept of man or the concept of rose flower. Causation is an outcome of a second intellection of our mind. So after working and reflecting upon some cases, upon some issues, upon some beings, we discover a sort of relation between two things, one as a cause and the second as an effect. And then our mind discovers or abstracts from this relation the concept of causation or causality. So instead of referring to the limits of existence, instead of referring to hudud al-wujud, it refers to different aspects or manners of wujud, anha al-wujud or shu'un al-wujud. So manners or aspects of the existence is something that we are concerned with when we deal with the secondary philosophical concepts. It's very likely that people may make mistakes, may get confused, may not be able to discern between the primary concepts and philosophical concepts, because they both apply to the objective beings. You can say this fire is a cause, so you are applying the concept of cause to something external, to something objective, and at the same time, you may, for example, apply something like, for example, being fire, or being, for example, cotton, or being, for example, iron, and so on, to the external and objective things. So people may unconsciously think that as long as you are applying these concepts to something external or objective, so they are identical. But it's not the case. These concepts are not identical. So we must be very careful. Or, for example, even a single concept may be approached from different angles. For example, you know that one of the secondary logical concepts or intelligibles is the concept of universality and being universal. For example, I say that man is universal. The concept of man is a universal concept. It means that it can be applied to more than one case, more than one individual. This person is a man, that person is a man. So this is a universal concept. Or I say, for example, this is a book and that is a book. So book is a universal concept. This is al-mafhum al-kulli. This is in contrast to al-mafhum al-juz'i, or particular or individual concept. For example, like saying Hassan, or like saying, for example, Ali, or Muhammad, and so on. So these are individual concepts. They can be applied only to one individual. Even if you have different people called Ali or different people called Muhammad, these are not universal concepts. In each case, the term is particularly, specifically coined for that person. So if this person is called Muhammad, this term is meant to be applied only to this person. So if you have different people called with the same name, indeed there are different names, different concepts. So this Muhammad is Muhammad son of, for example, so and so, and that is Muhammad son of so and so. So it's just something accidental that these people have different names. Anyway, when you have a concept such as universal or kulli, it means that it can be applied to different things. It does not mean, it does not require that you must already have a plenty of individuals. No, for example, suppose that you have a concept like, for example, rose flower. And suppose that, for example, you are in winter, and suppose that there is no rose flower in winter. It's only, for example, in the spring and summer that you have this. And there is no, for example, a special garden, botanic garden, and so on, that helps you to have rose flower in winter. Just suppose. Even if you have no individual rose flower outside in winter, still the concept of rose flower is universal concept, because it has this capability of being applied to more than one case. Okay? So this is very important. But when we come to this concept of universality or universal, we see that this concept can be approached from different angles. The very concept of universal has two different aspects at least. Sometimes we say this is universal because this can be applied to different things. But when we consider this concept itself as something that exists in our mind, as a mental being, then this is something different. So this concept in itself is an individual being. This is something which has no possibility of being applied to different things. It is something which is in my mind. It is particular. It is unique. It's like a mirror. The mirror itself is individual, is unique, but the mirror may reflect many, many things. So our mental concepts have two different aspects, two different sides. One is to show and reflect and represent the things which are beyond them. In this way, they may be individual or maybe universal. But the other aspect is their own identity, their own reality and existence. And in this case, all mental concepts are individual, all are particular, all are unique. Even when we rethink about them, reconsider them, it will be a new thing. If I had a concept of, for example, a book like philosophical instruction in my mind 1 hour ago, and now I think about it again and I have that concept again, these two concepts are different in reality. Of course, they reflect the same thing. So they are identical insofar as they reflect the same thing. But they are not identical insofar as they are two different beings. Or for example, if there is a concept of the book, philosophical instruction, in my mind and the same concept in your mind. These two concepts are only the same as far as what is reflected is concerned. But if we are concerned with what is existent in my mind and what is existent in your mind, so these will be two different concepts. So you see how important it is to be alert and to be careful and cautious when we are dealing with the concepts. So if we are not careful, we may make lots of mistakes without our own awareness, and then of course we will come to wrong conclusions. So this is a very important thing that the author asks us to be very careful about. The other thing that we must be very careful is about the way that we use terms. Of course, you know that no philosopher, no logician primarily is concerned with the terms. Because what is important for a philosopher or logician is the concept. So we want to understand the realities and we must use the concepts. Whether you are speaking English or Arabic or Farsi or German or French or any other language, as such is not important for a philosopher. What is important is to go beyond the terms to reach the concepts, and then to go beyond the concepts to reach the realities. However, there is no way to bypass the terms. The terms are very important. Of course, in knowledge by presence, we don't need terms, but you remember that we just said that even in those cases in which we have knowledge by presence, when we want to reflect upon them and we want to formulate them, we need to use concepts. Okay, so when we have concepts, whether it be in al-ilm al-husuli, acquired knowledge, or in al-ilm al-husuli, knowledge by presence after being formulated and translated into conceptual knowledge, we see that automatically the terms get involved. Because our mind is so used to working with the terms that it's very, very difficult, if not impossible, to deal with the concept without dealing with the terms, relevant terms. So when I want to, for example, work on the concept of universal, automatically the term universal comes to my mind. And this is very important. This is why some people, some philosophers and logicians have said that a single thing, a single being may have different sorts of existence, different sorts of realities. One is the external reality, one is the mental reality, and one is al-wujud al-lafzi, means a sort of linguistic reality. Because everything is reflected, is echoed by our language. And here, just in brackets, I should tell that the difference between different languages in being well developed for philosophical inquiries is very notable. Some languages are so profound and so well scrutinized that they have the capability of being a means for philosophy. But some languages are very primitive or very sensational or very based on the physical realities. So it will be very difficult for people, for those who speak those languages, to use that language or those languages for philosophy. Anyway, this was just something in brackets. So we need to use terms, not only to communicate, but also for our own selves. Even if I'm sitting in my own room or, for example, in library and thinking and reflecting upon a philosophical problem, I need to use terms. Okay. What is the problem here is that the terms are not always clear and self-evident. Sometimes they are ambiguous. Sometimes the same term may be used for different meanings. It's very common that you have a single term but referring to different meanings. For example, you have al-i'tibari, and al-i'tibari has different meanings in philosophy. Sometimes it means to be something which has no immediate instantiation, existence in the world. Sometimes it means something which is based on the contract. Sometimes it means that it is something which is external, which is objective, but it has no direct example. For example, it's a secondary philosophical intelligible. This is different from the first meaning. Anyway, we don't want to discuss about this at the moment. So the same term can be applied to different things, to different meanings. Or for example, in Arabic, you have this term ayn, which has been said it has up to 70 meanings. Sometimes it means eye, sometimes it means spring, and sometimes, for example, it means the maybe something like a scale, and so on. Sometimes it's to show the respect for someone. So up to 70 meanings. So we have to be very careful, because when this term is equivocal, this term has different meanings. So you may be concerned with the meaning A, you are talking about meaning A, and your partner in debate may think that you are talking about B. So what you are proving is different from what he negates, or what you negate is different from what he proves. You have all heard this famous story that 3 people were fighting with each other about what to do with the money that they had in share. And there were people who were speaking in different languages. So one was Arab, he was speaking Arabic, the other was speaking Turkish, the other was speaking Farsi. So they were all speaking about grape, but in their own languages. And someone who knew all these 3 languages said, why should you fight with each other? You are all in agreement. You are all saying that we must buy grapes. But grapes in Arabic is enab. In Farsi is angur. In Turkish is, for example, uzun. So you are making lots of quarrel with each other, but in reality, you have the same idea. So many problems that have happened in the history of mankind are caused because of misunderstanding. People have not had the same subject to discuss about. This person had something in his mind, the other person, the other party had another thing in his mind. So it's very important that when we are dealing with philosophy, and naturally we are forced to use terms, to be very careful about the way that we use terms. Sometimes different meanings are available for the same term. So the term is equivocal. We must be very careful. Sometimes the term is not equivocal, univocal. Sorry, the term is not equivocal, it's univocal. It has just one meaning, but different individuals, different cases. We must be very careful. For example, one of the very famous mistakes, when we say God exists, and we say that, for example, we exist, this book exists, this flower exists, that board exists, those trees exist. So we use the term existence. In all these cases, the term has one meaning, and that is to be real. But some people have thought that when we apply existence to God, that is totally different in meaning from when we apply it to other beings. And even some people have gone further and they have said that whenever we apply the term existence to God, it has its own meaning. When it apply to man, it has its own meaning. To flower, it has its own meaning. To tree, it has its own meaning. So they have reached numerous, or I could say endless, even more than numerous, endless meanings for the concept of being. Whereas we know that the concept of being is something identical in all these cases. Of course, the reality of existence of God is completely different from our own reality, but the concept is the same. So, just as it is wrong to take something which is univocal, equivocal, it's also wrong to take something which is equivocal to be univocal. Both are wrong. Both is wrong. So, it's very important that we don't get trapped with terms. Or the other problem that has happened is that some people have magnified the role of terms to the extent that they have summarized, they have reduced philosophy into linguistics. Many people, especially the neo-positivist or the logical positivist, they had this idea that the only thing that you must do in philosophy is to look after the terms and the language that you are using. And then automatically all your problems will be solved. So we don't have any substantial discussion. It's very important just to be very clear in your explanation, your expression, and then you would see that the disagreements would disappear. But this is not the case. Of course, many disagreements are because of the problem in our ways of expressing ourselves, expressing our ideas. But there are very substantial differences as well. People with the same language, people who use the concept exactly in the same way may still have some disagreements. So this is also one problem, to be very simple in the way that we deal with philosophy and think that we can solve all the problems with the language. So the author gives us these two warnings. One warning about the concepts and the other about the terms and language. And then he says, okay, now let's start our main discussion about existence. Because we said that in this section we are going to talk about existence, which is the subject matter of philosophy. Because philosophy studies existence as such, existence, coexistence. So let's talk about existence. Because you know that whenever something is introduced as a subject matter for a science, for a discipline, we must have a clear idea of that concept, and also we must have some proof for the existence of that subject matter. If we talk about something that does not exist, so there would be no point, at least not that much benefit for us. So regarding philosophy, we said that its subject matter is being or existence. So, do we need any definition, any clarification for this concept? No. Because this concept is one of the most clear and obvious concepts that we have. And if you want to define it, you need to use something which would be less obvious than the concept of wujud itself. So we don't need any definition for this. All of us understand the meaning of wujud or being or existence or hasti in our own languages. What about the reality of this subject matter? Is there any reality outside? Is there any being outside? Is there any form of existence outside? Or it is just in my mind? Some people may have had this idea that there is no reality in the world. Everything is just a dream, an illusion. So there is nothing there. It's just me and my mind. And if you say, okay, so you are at least one being, they say, no, even I have doubt about myself. If you say that, okay, at least you have this certainty about your doubt, so this is a being, they may say, no, even I have doubt about my doubt and doubt about my doubt about my doubt. So in this way, there will be no chance for developing any discussion with these people. But I don't think any reasonable, any rational person would have doubt about the reality. We may differ on the cases, on the individuals, on the limits and extent of the reality. But generally speaking, we have no doubt about the reality. We believe in ourselves, we believe in the world around us. We believe that there are people around us. The existence of the subject matter of philosophy, which is existence itself, is obvious, is self-evident. And we have direct knowledge of some cases of this existence by knowledge, by presence, which leaves no doubt for anyone. My awareness or my knowledge about my own being and existence is direct, without using any concepts or terms. I can understand that. And no one can have doubt about it. So at least we have something to begin with. As I said, people may disagree about how many beings are there or about how many types of beings are there, whether they are only physical beings or there are also spiritual ones. But generally speaking, there is no doubt that there is a reality and there are something there. So this is something that is very clear. But unfortunately, there have always been some problems, some misunderstandings. We just refer to one of them here, and that is the one which happened by David Berkeley, an English empiricist, philosopher. He had the idea that existence is perception. Existence is nothing other than being able to perceive or being perceived. And he had the idea that whenever, for example, I think about something, about a friend of mine, or about, for example, my book, or about a flower, about a bird, about a mountain, about a river, all these things are something which are known to me and which exist in my mind. There is nothing outside. And of course, everything is in the mind of God. It's very difficult for us to think that he may have meant this really. Maybe he has put it in this way, but he didn't want to deny the reality of the world. But this is very famous. Of course, I have studied his own works, and in some cases you may think that he didn't want to deny the existence of the real world. But he did not want to deny the existence of the real world. He didn't want to deny the existence of the real world. He didn't want to deny the existence of the real world. He didn't want to deny the existence of the real world. He didn't want to deny the existence of the real world. He didn't want to deny the existence of the real world. He didn't want to deny the existence of the real world. He didn't want to deny the existence of the real world. He didn't want to deny the existence of the real world. He didn't want to deny the existence of the real world. He didn't want to deny the existence of the real world. He didn't want to deny the existence of the real world. He didn't want to deny the existence of the real world. He didn't want to deny the existence of the real world. He didn't want to deny the existence of the real world. He didn't want to deny the existence of the real world. He didn't want to deny the existence of the real world. He didn't want to deny the existence of the real world. He didn Just he wanted perhaps to say that it's originated from the knowledge of God. But in any case, if someone has such a, for example, such an understanding of being, can I accept it? No. The concept of existence is different from perception. First of all, existence is one concept, but you say perceiving or being perceived. These are two concepts. And even if you just have one concept, for example, perception, not saying perceiving and being perceived, perception. Perception is different from existence. Something must exist, then it can be perceived. So it comes later in order. Or if it's just something which is perceived and it's not yet actualized. So this means that being perceived is different from being existent. Because sometimes you have first the existence and then you abstract a concept or you develop a knowledge. Sometimes you may have something in your mind, some idea, and then you try to actualize that. You could very easily distinguish between these two things. Being existent, being perceived, or perception. It's not very difficult to refute this idea and to understand the difference between existence and perception. But unfortunately, we have had cases like this. But generally speaking, as I said, it seems that there is no doubt about human beings, at least about the majority of them, that what we mean by the concept of existence. Concept of existence is very clear for us, it's self-evident, and also it's self-evident for us that there is some area, some realm, some universe of reality. So inshallah, in the following lessons we will talk more about being or existence, about its concept, and about different problems related to existence. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.